Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Murphy. First, I'm very disappointed not to be able to join you at this conference, as it was in Atlanta 25 years ago that my daughter Taryn was diagnosed with alpha-mannosidosis. We have prepared a look back at ISMRD for you, how it came to be formed, and what we have accomplished in 20 years. Did I just say 20 years? None of this would have been possible without hard work and dedication from all who have donated their time and energy to our cause. This includes all who have served or are now serving on ISMRD's Board of Directors. Thank you. Also, I'd like to acknowledge a core cadre of scientists and clinicians who believed in our goals and stuck with us for many years. I'm looking at you, Steve Walkley, and you, Sandy Dazzo. But enough of this preface. Let's roll the tape. Our story begins on August 3rd, 1984. After a 19-hour wait for her birth, my daughter was born. I was alarmed at first by her head, which was shaped like a cone as it came down the birth canal. Otherwise, I'm the father of a pretty little girl named Taryn. It wasn't long before our new child began having health issues, though none alarmed her pediatrician. She had a noticeably large head. An ultrasound, however, showed no hydrocephalus, and she had recurrent ear infections almost immediately. Other seemingly unrelated symptoms appear over the next 8 years. Enlarged adenoids, trigger finger, root canal at age 8, eruptive tooth emergence pattern, periodic bowel and urinary control problems, unusual bone growth and foot x-rays, etc. Most of all, we noticed that her milestones were not being met. Nevertheless, despite misgivings about her development, no causal link was found until she turned 10. Around the same time, two sisters were born in Tromsø, Norway, with developmental delays similar to Taryn's. Celia, the eldest, and Amelia Mom were children of Dag and Inger Elimam. Dag, a doctor of internal medicine, and his wife were so alarmed that they had Celia and Amelia tested for a possible genetic defect. In 1989, both were diagnosed with alpha-mannosidosis. Because Dr. Mom was employed by the University of Tromsø at the time, he was able to conscript a group of scientists to form a research group with a purpose to better understand alpha-mannosidosis. And so, in 1991, the Tromsø Mannosidosis Group was formed with collaborators Øyvind Nielsen, a medical geneticist, and Ole Tallesrud, a biochemist, and utilizing students at the university. In 1988, we moved from Virginia to Atlanta, Georgia, so that I could accept a position at a hotel there. While living in Atlanta, we became more aware and concerned at Taryn's development. And so it was that we eventually were led to a new pediatrician who understood genetics and immediately referred us to a geneticist at Emory Eggleston Children's Hospital. At Taryn's initial exam there in November of 1994, Dr. Dwayne Blackston believed Taryn may have Hurler or Hurler-Shea syndrome, two MPS disorders. However, a urine sample was analyzed which pointed to an oligosaccharide disease, likely alpha-mannosidosis. We returned to Emory and a blood sample was drawn. In December 1994, the blood assay confirmed alpha-mannosidosis, a disease with no treatment or cure. With this diagnosis in hand, I immediately began scouring the internet, which was more of a Wild West environment than it is today. Using Prodigy, CompuServe, and America Online, three self-contained online services, and the nascent World Wide Web, I began locating information. The Schexnayers of Louisiana, pictured here, were found via an online friendship with the associate editor of Exceptional Parent magazine, who allowed me to post a search letter in her magazine for anyone with information on Tarrant's disease. They were the first family who were experiencing the same situation as ours, and we became friends. One of the features of my website was a discussion board with different topic forums called the Gateway Kiosk. One of these forums, called the LifeLink Search Forum, was designed for users to find others on the internet affected by their child's particular disease. Selfishly, I created the first topic, which was about alpha-mannosidosis, and I immediately posted a message in a bottle, so to speak, hoping someone would answer. Eureka! After 6 months came the response that for me was like finding the Holy Grail. It was from Dr. Dag Malm in Norway. A few months later, I was contacted by Dr. Kelly Mormon at the University of Georgia's Complex Carbohydrate Research Center. Like the Tromsø group, Dr. Mormon's lab was attempting to clone and sequence the gene for alpha-mannosidosis. I was overwhelmed by how well this device I created worked. In 1997, the Tromsø group became the first to publish their success in cloning and sequencing the gene causing alpha-mannosidosis, which is located on the 19th chromosome. This success was the first step in understanding the disease and developing potential therapies. In early March of 1999, ISMRD formed in the living room of our Baltimore home and created its articles of incorporation. We felt it vital that the organization should be inclusive, international, and dues-free from the outset. The latter was an important declaration, as we felt affected families had already paid their dues by virtue of their child's diagnosis. The formal organizational name created was the International Society for Mannosidosis and Related Diseases, shortened for brevity's sake to ISMRD. The founding board consisted of my ex-wife Deborah, my boss, Doug, an attorney friend Melissa, and myself. Our mission was to promote research and advocacy for oligosaccharide storage diseases, which then consisted of 6 similar disorders as listed here. Shortly after forming, my first official duty as president was to attend the 5th International Symposium on MPS and Related Diseases in Vienna, Austria, from March 18th to the 21st. My goal was to encourage cooperation among mannosidosis researchers, following up on my November meeting with Dr. Tallisrud, and to promote the idea of a global unified approach to lysosomal disease research and advocacy. I also intended to recruit ISMRD's first members of our scientific advisory board if possible. Among my targets were Dr. Malm, Dr. Stephen Walkley, and Dr. Mark Haskins, plus anyone else who might have an interest in our PREME organization. My attendance also resulted in introducing me to John Foreman of New Zealand, who is the father of twins with alpha-mannosidosis and a key figure in ISMRD's success. ISMRD's founding year resulted in a new website and in June, our initial issue of a quarterly newsletter called Pathways. In August, we received our charitable license as a 501c3 organization. This enabled us to seek tax-deductible donations and grants. So, by year's end, we had met 3 of our initial goals: creating a website, distributing a newsletter, and gaining legal recognition as a charitable organization by the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. In June 1999, our first international board member, John Foreman, was elected and given the, quote, working title, unquote, of Pacific Rim Coordinator, which was later expanded to Asia Pacific Coordinator. He always seemed to spend as much time in Europe and the States, however, so in retrospect that may have been too limiting. In a few years, John succeeded me as ISMRD's president and was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by the organization in 2017. In September 1999, John flew to the U.S. to participate in a board planning session chaired by a local meeting planner. It became obvious what our roadblocks, no, opportunities, would be going forward. With the benefit of our organization's website and outreach efforts, we made contact with families whose children were affected by fucosidosis and sialidosis. A few of these parents went on to serve on ISMRD's board of directors, including Carolyn Paisley-Dew of Australia, who is still an energetic member. By now, it became clear that attendance at MPS conferences was a great way for ISMRD to network. So a few members of our board attended the 6th International MPS Symposium in Minneapolis, Minnesota. These included John Foreman, Liz Cunha, Deborah Murphy, Taryn, and myself. While there, I met with Dr. Alessandra Dazzo, whose research interests included sialidosis, and I not so subtly recruited her to join our scientific advisory board, which she graciously accepted. While in Minneapolis, John, Deborah, Taryn, and I visited the home of the Smith family, whose daughter Jenny had recently undergone a bone marrow transplant for alpha-mannosidosis. This was the first time, of which I'm aware, that mannosidosis family members had gathered together. The center picture in this slide shows us on the Miss Smith's desk patio. Having recently joined the board of directors of the Genetic Alliance in Washington, D.C., I received advance notice of the Alliance's intention to convene a day of public awareness for the human genome. This would be a multi-agency celebration of the Human Genome Project, including a full day of workshops, activities, and public forums. Also to be included was a special photographic exhibit at the Smithsonian Museum called Positive Exposure, featuring glamorous photos of people with a genetic disease. ISMRD volunteered to participate and sent 4 young adults with alpha-mannosidosis to the New York City studios of Rick Guidotti, a renowned fashion photographer, who would create the exhibit. As previously related, the partnership between the Genetic Alliance and former professional fashion photographer Rick Guidotti resulted in museum-quality photos of affected individuals from 15 or more genetic organizations. These were displayed in the Great Rotunda of the Smithsonian Institute in conjunction with the People's Genome Celebration. ISMRD was proud to see 2 of our own, David Pierce and Taryn Murphy, celebrated in such an incredibly uplifting way. During the Positive Exposure exhibit, the Genetic Alliance handed out its annual Art of Advocacy Award. ISMRD was very proud that one of our own board members, John Foreman, received aptly due recognition for his sacrifices, passion, and contributions to understanding lysosomal diseases. John shared the award with Augusto Adoni, the founder of the Myelin Project and creator of Lorenzo's oil, the subject of a Hollywood film by the same name. The 7th MPS Symposium in Paris in 2002 afforded ISMRD its first meeting among families from different continents and diagnoses. Representing ISMRD were board members John Foreman and Liz Cunha, and a dinner celebration of families and professionals enabled the largest such gathering of our diseases to date under one roof. Affected families came from the United Kingdom, France, Finland, Norway, New Zealand, and the United States. Realizing that the term oligosaccharide storage diseases was no longer sufficient and reflecting the agenda of the upcoming NIH Scientific Conference, ISMRD changed its focus to the more appropriate moniker of glycoprotein storage diseases. In doing so, we realized that we should invite those affected by mucolipidosis 2 and 3 to our newly expanded family. Doing so introduced us to wonderful people such as, clockwise from top, Frankie and Joey Nagy, Andre Andrews, the Nagels, and Sarah and Hayden Noble. In April 2004, the first ever scientific conference on glycoprotein storage diseases occurred in Rockville, Maryland, and was truly a key objective of ISMRD since its inception. Thanks go to Steve Groff for guiding us and to Dr. Stephen Walkley for steering the agenda, the speakers, and for being such an ally to all of us then and now. The conference was very successful and enabled families and scientists to meet and interact for the first time ever. More importantly, ISMRD was not relying on other organizations' conferences. We were now piloting our own plane. In conjunction with the scientific conference, ISMRD put together separate programs for parents and their children for the 3 days we met. This was a profound time, much as it is today for many of you in Atlanta. Pictured are group photos of mucolipidosis families on the left and monocytosis families on the right. Being isolated and alone with your child's diagnosis was no longer a reality for all who were portrayed here. The Rockville Conference was so life-changing for those who attended that ISMRD organized another family meeting in 2005 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. More families attended, and we enjoyed a new first, the largest to date gathering of ML-affected families ever. In addition, attendees were able to listen to enlightening discussions from Professor David Silence of Australia and Professor Jules Leroy of Belgium. In 2007, ISMRD held its second Scientific and Family Conference in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The professional program again was funded and organized via the National Institutes of Health and related agencies. As before, there were programs geared for families and children, along with a 5K walk-run benefit called Crossing Oceans for a Cure that raised money for ISMRD. Attendance was greater than in Rockville, and many new friendships were forged. More importantly, glycoprotein storage diseases were kept on the front burner so that progress continued on understanding their clinical impacts and developing new therapies. It also marked my retirement from the board of directors, in whose capable hands I passed the baton. And so, I also pass on this historical narrative to Mark Stark and others who will continue the show forward.
This is Carolyn Paisley-Dew, ISMRD's Vice President of Communications. Mark asked me to speak so you wouldn't have to listen to an American for the entire presentation. Our organisation again pulled together families and researchers from around the world to attend the third International Conference for Glycoprotein Storage Diseases, held in Charleston, South Carolina in 2012. The meeting was jointly hosted by ISMRD and the Greenwood Genetics Centre, or the GGC. Natural history clinics for 30 patients were also held at GGC's Charleston office on July 27 and 30. It took a number of years to pull together the funding and researchers for this conference. We would not have been able to hold this conference without the commitment from our primary investigator, Dr. Sarah Cathy, and government, private and corporate sponsors. After 2 years of fundraising and planning, the most ambitious event that ISMRD had ever attempted to organise took place in 2015. Families and professionals from around the world gathered in St. Louis for what would be the largest conference ISMRD has ever delivered. Countries represented were Australia, Canada, Norway, Italy, Spain, New Zealand, Belgium, Brazil, Germany, USA, United Kingdom, France, Finland, Sweden and Ireland, which gave us a total of 180 delegates. Again, the commitment of the primary investigator, Dr. Stuart Kornfeld, was vital in putting together the technical program and helping find funding from private and corporate sponsors. Combined with the conference was a continuation of the natural history study that was started in the Greenwood Centre in 2012. The 5th Glycoproteinosis Conference brought basic scientists and clinicians from around the world to Rome, Italy, to share with patients and their families the latest discoveries. This conference was special in many ways. It was the first to be held in Europe with the intent of strengthening connections among affected families around the globe and to strengthen our connections with other support groups in Europe. Sandra Dazzo was the primary investigator, and she did a wonderful job pulling together a great technical program. We were very fortunate to have the pharmaceutical firm Chiesi to be the primary sponsor of the conference. ISMRD was grateful to have the Italian MPS Society helping us in the early stages of planning of the children's program. Countries represented were Australia, Norway, Italy, Spain, New Zealand, Brazil, Germany, USA, United Kingdom, France, Austria, Saudi Arabia, Denmark, Netherlands, Algeria, Slovenia, Sweden and Ireland, which gave us a total of 175 delegates. Research has always been an important part of the ISMRD mission. Researchers need a baseline to understand the natural progression of the disease. This can be very difficult with rare diseases where there are few patients in any one location in the world. ISMRD has helped bring affected individuals from around the world to allow clinicians to collect patient data. In July 2006, Dr. Sarah Cathy called it serendipity. We called it an answer to many prayers. With the announcement that Dr. Sarah Cathy would be doing a natural history study for mucolipidosis, families around the world began contacting ISMRD, expressing their interest in taking part in the study. Families from around the US came to Greenwood for the commencement of the natural history study. The affected group's ages ran from 6 to 43. These families were the true pioneers of the study. In 2010, Jenny Noble, an ISMRD board member, received a research scholarship from an insurance company in New Zealand and was able to bring Dr. Sarah Cathy and her team to Australia and New Zealand. This allowed families that lived far from the US to participate in the study and ensured that a broader spectrum of patients would be included in the study. In support of the 2012 conference in South Carolina at the Greenwood Centre, the US National Institute of Health funded $250,000 to support Dr. Cathy's continued work to collect family history data. This enabled the study to run in parallel with the conference in 2012. ISMRD has raised more than $1 million for research and conferences. We have gained momentum in the last few years by partnering with the MPS societies around the world. This has helped with conference funding and research grants. ISMRD and the US MPS Society have cooperated to provide primary funding on 3 major research projects in the last few years, which are listed here. ISMRD has also helped recruit patients and provide funding for several other research projects. The research now underway will lead to better understanding of these terrible diseases and the eventual treatment and cure of these disorders. ISMRD plans to continue to leverage our relationships with researchers, patient advocacy groups and industry to support research. Thank you for joining us in our walk down memory lane tonight. We've come a long way in the last 20 years, but we have much further to go. We hope you will join us on this journey. Thank you.